Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Yesterday we talked about that the Roman Emperor Augustus decided to attack Yemen, and why he decided to attack Yemen, and how he decided to attack Yemen, and what was the outcome of that war. There came some very interesting questions. And they said, well, if he was sending an army from Egypt to go and fight in Yemen, why did he take a land route instead of sending in the naval fleets? Because Romans had naval fleets, so why did they take the land route? They could have easily sailed through the sea, through the Red Sea, would have sailed down south, and would have gotten off their boat somewhere near to their destination and would have done it what they were supposed to do. Why did they have to go such a long way and destroy their own people and make them suffer? And these are very valid questions, and especially if you know that almost 120 trade ships used to go yearly between Egypt and Yemen. It was something that was happening quite often. So why is it that Romans decided not to use their naval fleet when their trade ships were 120 trade ships were anyway going back and forth between Egypt and Yemen? So it was not like they've never tested the waters before. They were familiar with the route. So why didn't they take the easier route, and why did they go the difficult way? Very valid and legit question. Now, if you are familiar with that region, you know that Egypt is connected with Asia, especially the modern-day Palestine region, and we have this Sinai Peninsula. Why is it that one side of the Sinai Peninsula is the Gulf Suez and the other side is the Gulf Aqaba? So they could have easily come from Egypt into the Gulf Suez and would have then started sailing into the Red Sea and would start coming down, right? It just makes sense. Why would they have to go to the Nabatean kingdom on the other side in the Jordan-Palestine region and then march from there? It just makes this triangle in between. And that's why through that we have created the Suez Canal, which connects the Red Sea with the Mediterranean. So just a narrow opening, man-made narrow opening was made just so that the ships would not have to go across the Africa, or would not have to go to the ports of Egypt and then the goods be transported via trucks on the other side into the Mediterranean, and then would go, or channel them through the Nile, through a canal system. To avoid all of those situations, we created the Suez Canal. Now, let's go back to where we are now, which is back in 25 BCE. In fact, let's go even a little bit further before, because so that there is one subscriber of this channel who has been kind enough to point out my mistakes. And as I was going through the comments, I came to realize that he also said, you did not corrected the mistakes I pointed out. That means, are you showing the signs of kibr? Well, it's not like I'm why would I show the signs of kibr? Astaghfirullah al-azim. It's not like we go through each and every comment, or the sequence in which videos are recorded might not be the same sequence in which they are released. Sometimes videos are recorded, multiple of them in one sitting, or one day, and they're released at different times. So the corrections he made, of course, sometimes there's a slip of tongue. Sometimes it's quite possible that there may be a mispronunciation on my end. And thank you for correction. So I want to recognize these 3 mistakes that he said. You didn't pronounce the idol Hubal. You said it was Hubul. Well, the correct pronunciation is Hubal. So thank you for that. Similarly, there was another idol. In fact, it's a star that was being considered as by the 7 temples we talked about, that some people believed that Makkah is being a place that is to represent the star of Zuhal. I probably said Zuhl or something like that, but I didn't say Zuhal, so it's Zuhal. So thank you for that correction as well. And in the last episode, I mistakenly said that Augustus, when he was fighting the Egypt, and he was fighting Cleopatra, and it was Mark Antony. Mistakenly, I said Mark Anthony, with a TH instead of TO. So thank you very much. I just wanted that to come here so that, people are not thinking as if, I have any kind of kibr, or people are thinking that, because the comment that came out this morning, as was shared to me right before this recording, is that the same gentleman is saying that now that you are even making mistakes in English, you were just making mistakes in Arabic before. Of course, we are human beings. We can all make mistakes. Nobody is perfect. And I hope you are not thinking that you are perfect too. Anyway, so let's move on to our topic, so that, everybody is aware of that. It's quite possible sometimes when we switch languages, and sometimes when we are saying things from our memory, things sometimes get mixed up, and sometimes we are reading in different languages. So when I present to you information, I'm not necessarily reading this information in English literature alone. I've been reading in several different languages and then translating all of that from memory to you in English. So it's quite possible that certain mistakes might be made. So let's get to some of the facts about this. So yes, it is true that this particular war took place once Augustus realized that he is strong enough in Egypt. Now, let me give you some background information of the Egypt. When Egypt became part of the Roman Empire, or when Cleopatra and Mark Antony were defeated, at that time, a prefect was put in Egypt. His name was Gaius Cornelius Gallus. He was the prefect of Egypt from 31 BCE all the way through 26 BCE. That was the time frame. Due to some political differences, he was removed from the office, and another prefect was put in his place, and this prefect's name was Aelius Gallus. It was Aelius Gallus who was given this duty of attacking the Yemen. This was the second prefect of this region of Egypt. So what he did, he prepared, actually, the idea was to take the naval fleet into the Red Sea and attack Yemen through the sea. That was the idea. But naval fleet was in the Mediterranean Sea. So they had to figure out a way to bring all of that naval fleet in the shortest amount of time from the Mediterranean Sea into the Red Sea, or at least in the Gulf Suez. So these are 80 warships and 130 transport ships that needed to be channeled through the Nile Canal out of the Mediterranean into the Red Sea. So now they are to sail through the Gulf Suez. But the problem is, here arises the problem. See, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does things, all calculations fail. They were of the view that we have been using this route for such a long time, and there was another problem that Romans were facing. Anytime they would send their transport ships from Egypt all the way to Yemen and back, there were lots of pirates in this region, some coming from Africa and some in the Indian Ocean, that would constantly attack the Roman ships. So Augustus at one point wanted to take the charge of the entire trade route from the ports of Yemen all the way to Rome, so that the money and the taxes are flowing into the Roman Empire, and at the same time wanted to clear the sea passage and eliminate the pirates with heavy naval fleet presence of Rome, where this is a Roman province, so that gives them every advantage of being in the waters of Yemen and controlling it. So that was his idea that he wanted to execute, and Aelius Gallus was on the same page with him. So as to make this happen, Gallius started sailing. However, the water condition was so bad that these 10,000 soldiers that comprised of Romans and Egyptians that started sailing into the waters, their ships were stranded for a long time. In fact, a lot of the ships actually got destroyed, and a lot of the ships which didn't get destroyed were stranded on the reefs. So they had to somehow because Gulf of Aqaba was extremely harsh on them. So they had to come off the waters into the Nabatean kingdom. And this particular prefect, Aelius Gallus, had very good relation with the Nabatean king, and the Nabatean king Obodos III, or the Obodos III, also was an ally of the Romans. So when these people came off the ship, their soldiers, the soldiers of the Roman army, were suffering from we're suffering from diseases, from malnourishment, and a certain kind of a disease called scurvy. Some books write that the soldiers were actually suffering from scurvy, which is the vitamin C deficiency. So their immune system was very weak, and they were extremely sick. And because of eating bad food, or the water that they were consuming, somehow everything affected their health conditions to an extent where they had to come off at a place called Leucome in the Nabatean kingdom, and they had to stay there the summer and the winter, almost 6 months. The army stayed there, and then after that they started moving to Yemen, which they called Arabia Felix, means the lucky Arabia. That means the wealthy, fertile, rich part of the Arabia, as rest of the Arabia is all desert. That's how the Romans were thinking about this region, and they wanted to take a hold of this. So there were 10,000 Roman and Egyptian soldiers in this army that was going to attack Yemen. There were also 500 Jewish soldiers that were sent by the King Herod of Judea, and there were 1,000 Nabatean soldiers as well, which were sent by the King Obodas III. And the man by the name of Silas, who is vizier, or one of the very high administrative position holder, was the guide. He was chosen to be the guide, or he presented himself to be the guide, so that he can take this massive army through the Arabian Peninsula all the way into Yemen. So in this course, they started moving towards Yemen. And also, let me tell you this, moving of the fleet from Mediterranean into the Red Sea, and also preparing an army of 10,000, and all of these arrangements took approximately 1 year. It was not done in a day or two or a month. It took almost a year, and then after a year-long preparation, when they started to sail, of course, we're talking about 2,000 plus years ago. They didn't have the navigation systems that we do. They didn't have the satellite communications like we do. Sometimes we start thinking about things from the times that we are living in. And Romans recently learned about the routes that they were taking also, as they were still in the process of expansion. They recently conquered Egypt. They recently got hold of the Egyptian ports. They learned somewhat sea navigations from the Greeks, but it was not their specialty also. They were still in the learning phase. That's what some of the historians also bring onto the table. So anyway, as the winds forced them in the Gulf of Aqaba to reach the Leucoma or Hawrah, that's where they came out. They stayed there for almost 6 months, and now they started moving towards Yemen. So the march was 30 days long, in which they entered another Roman ally area of Areta tribe, which was ally, so they could easily pass through the Areta tribe's region without a problem, and then they would spend another 50 days in the desert. And then, because this is a massive force you're talking about, close to 11,500 people are marching, and so it took them longer time than people who would be riding on a horse. So by the time they reached Najran, that was another 50 days after those 30 days. So in 80 days, they have reached Najran. And as you know, Najran is in the north of Yemen. They are going for the city of Ma'arib, which is central. So they still have to go through several cities that we talked about. They conquered some more lands. And then as they started running out of the resources, they had to finally let go of things as they reached Ma'arib. And now they have to go back because their general decided that there is no point of moving forward. Then Aelius Gallus then decided that we should go back. So when they started going back, also remember, they were roaming around the Arabian desert somewhere in Yemen for 6 months, going in one direction, conquering a town, going in another direction, and they were putting all of this blame later on their guide, that he himself was lost or he did the betrayal, whatever was the case we talked about last time. So then Aelius Gallus decided to return back. 6 months in the wilderness of Yemen, 80 days marching from the Nabatean kingdom all the way to Najran, and now on the way back, it took Aelius only 60 days to reach the Red Sea. That made him realize that how much time he had wasted. Now, in the battlefield, they only lost 7 men out of 11,500. Only 7 men were lost in the battlefield. Majority of the army was lost to diseases. Majority of the army was lost to hunger, malnourishment, lack of water, other reasons people were dying. Very small army reached the Red Sea coast. Then they crossed the sea to Myos Homos or Abu Saqar in Egypt. And then from there, they went to Coptos and then to Alexandria. So this is some background information just to help you understand why is it that they did not continue on the sea route and what exactly happened and the underlying background information. So I hope it helps you clear up a lot of your doubts. And again, with all this massive damage in terms of the naval fleet, in terms of the armed forces, and in terms of the resources and the money, and they gain nothing out of it except for maybe they get to learn about the terrains of Arabian Peninsula, which didn't help them anyway. So they never went in the direction ever. Plus, they were extremely busy in Europe as well over the period of time. Germany, for example, have kept them very busy for a very long time. And then in the next some years to come, in next 100, 120, 130 years or so, anyway, they took over the Nabatean kingdom and Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine. All of this region became part of Roman Empire. It became a Roman province as opposed to being smaller kingdoms who were allies of Rome. So they started moving in this direction as far as they could. So anyway, I hope that cleared a lot of your doubts and hopefully that would have answered a lot of questions. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.